I'll make noise. There we go. Thank you, Byron, so much for worship this morning, for the message to trust in Him, the message that where could I go but to the Lord. Critical for us. I don't know how that little girl made it on the screen. Just happens to be my granddaughter. Well, Marlene's granddaughter, too. I have to share ownership there. That's little Miss Lindley. Shine, don't whine. She's good at both of them. And most of us aren't we? We have our victories. She's holding up her putt-putt stick. We took her putt-putting over here at this little one over Lakeside. That's a great course if you haven't been there. It's just a great place to go. But by the third hole, it was determined that Lindley was better at soccer than at putt-putt. So we asked her to just kick it, and it worked a whole lot better from then on. She would kick the ball. Had a great deal of fun that way. But then we get to where we whine sometimes too, don't we? Attitude makes a lot of difference in our life. Generally, it has a lot to do with how we process things, how we feel about matters, how they are perceived by us. The attitude that we have really begins to change. And we can take that attitude and learn to shine, or we can constantly learn to whine. It looks like in our world we live in a time of victimization where we are out to blame someone else for our issues and our problems, and we end up whining a lot. And then a lot of times we don't have the situation we want. Things have not gone the way that we would like. And we ask, should we shine in those situations? Do I really expect to follow a God that puts me in places that are hard for me to walk? And why would God do that? Why would God give me challenges and trials? Why would He allow challenges and trials? Why would He test me in any way, shape, or form? Why would God put me through that? And a lot of people simply say, if God's going to put me through that, then I don't need that kind of God. I got enough grief in my life without God going through those things. So they throw their hands up and leave that God. Sometimes we're with Job and we simply throw our hands up and we listen to our friends, and our friends say, well, we don't understand the test you're going through, buddy, but you did something to tick God off. He is upset. And Job says, me and God are okay. We're all right. I'm not sure what's going on. And in the midst of my trial, I'm going to ball up my fist and shake it in the face of God and say, what's going on? And then we hear that voice from God that simply says, I'm in charge. Where were you when I made stuff? Where were you when I set the constellations in the sky? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the seas? I am God. God has not promised us that we will not have difficult times. Some of you have been through trials that I can't fathom. Can't even imagine. And I've watched you walk with grace and faith through those. The difficulties that just are beyond us. And God has not promised us that we would not have trials. He has promised us that He would carry us all through any moment that comes. That there'll be no time when He is not God to us, that He does not carry us along. But He hadn't said that those would be easy times to walk through. He hadn't said that would be easy. James, and no other text is going to come up. You just have to look at Lindley all morning. But I would like you to find James chapter 1. If you can find it in a literal book, I'd like you to find it in a literal book. If you only have electronics with you, then that's okay. You know what happens with electronic Bibles? You don't know whether Daniel comes first or David. You don't know whether Revelation is written before Zechariah. There's this disconnect in order. Now, these kids and all the younger kids are going to learn to grow up with that disconnect, and they're going to be able to navigate it just fine. But for many of us, it's important to know where James is found and who James is, as we talked last week. And to hear James's word James 1 and verse 2. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you will be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Boy, that's a hard word to hear. Consider it all joy, my brethren. He didn't say, just sort of muddle through it. He says, I want you to consider it all joy. I'm not saying the event is joyful. I want you to consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, struggles that come to your life, difficulties that come. Have you ever thought about the power of challenges? Have you ever thought about the role that they have in your life, the purpose of a test, what a test is about? And we look at tests as something for us to fail. But tests are there for our approval. They're there to show a teacher what we haven't learned yet, what we don't know. They're there to show us what we have grasped, what we have gained, how we do move. I remember the time I moved into high school band as a freshman. We got out of marching season. They wouldn't let us challenge until marching season was over. Are you familiar with how challenges work at band, or at least how they did 40 years ago? Plus, I guess that was 44 now. You had to give 2 days' notice to the person sitting above you in the seating line. I played trumpet. So I start picking them off. You get to pick the music. They get 2 days to practice. Then you both play it for the director. Usually a blind director, though I'm sure they knew who was playing all the time. We'll ask Glenn about that. And then, if you excelled, you got to advance. If you didn't, you stayed where you were. And I just started picking them off. Picked off every senior there was until I got to sit first chair. And all the seniors got together and said, this is not going to happen. This will not be how this goes. So immediately, 2 days later, I get a challenge. He picks the music. I've got to play. My challenge was not met well. The next day, the next senior picked the challenge. 2 days later, I'm sitting third chair. The next senior picked the challenge. 2 days later, I'm sitting fourth chair. 2 days later, I'm sitting fifth chair. That was as low as I went. But anyway, those seniors said, this is not going to be how it goes. But did you know that even that was good for them and it was good for me? Because a challenge showed me what I didn't know. It let me excel or fail, but it caused the band to be better, right? We were all Region Honor Band that year equipment, right? Because we had that sort of environment. We're going to challenge one another. We're going to make each other better. We're going to figure out, if you can't play that run, that's the run I'm going to challenge you on. And I'm going to listen to see if you can play it. If you can't get it done, then I'm going to challenge you right there. And pretty soon, everybody's hitting the runs because nobody's losing a chair, right? We need to be challenged because it brings us to what he says in verse 3 there. Verse 4, let endurance have its perfect result so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. That doesn't mean that you play the piece perfectly. It means you have advanced to the degree that you need, but then your completion, you have arrived with health. And you got to where you needed to be. Life sometimes throws us all sorts of challenges. I think Satan loves to challenge us. We can't say God doesn't challenge us, can we? God tests us too. I had someone tell me that didn't happen. We'll get there in a week. The next sermon is God doesn't tempt us, but God tests us all the time. He puts us under the test. He took a young man named Joseph and gave him a great dream one night. A couple of different illustrations in it. Sheaves of wheat bowing down, planets bowing down. Joseph tells the dream he had to his brothers. And his brothers say, not in our house. They sold him into slavery. Some Ishmaelites came by. They had decided to kill him. They'd made up their mind, we're going to throw you in a pit and take you out. We're not going to be subservient to you. And he just told them the dream God had. I think he was probably a little arrogant when he said it. I don't know. Boy, he had to go through a test. Ishmaelite traders sold him to Potiphar down in Egypt. And boy, Potiphar's wife made false accusations against him. And he is tested. Rape charges, arrest, prison time. Innocent, but paying the penalty. He was guilty in Egypt. God, what are you doing in my life? You're going to shine, you're going to whine. Who are you going to be, Joseph? Joseph starts to shine. And there are dreams that need interpreted and things that need done. And pretty soon, Joseph is the Prince of Egypt. You know what he's doing? He's saving food for those brothers that put him in slavery. He looks them in the eye at the end and says, you know what? God meant it for good. You meant it for harm. God meant it for good. I don't know where tests come from. Satan means it for harm. Sometimes people mean it for harm. Sometimes people we love mean it to harm us, to put us in our place, to set us down where we go. He says, I want you to shine in those moments. Don't whine in those moments. What just awful bad stuff is happening to me. As Byron said plainly this morning, bring whoever you are. We're not trying to get you to be artificial. Bring whoever you are. But first of all, realize that whatever you're going through, God is carrying you through it. He is walking through it with you. He has not abandoned you in it. And He is giving you opportunity to have your faith perfected, for it to grow, to show you something. I want to bring you along, show you something about yourself. No, you didn't know what you thought you knew, but you were challenged and you grew. And it was the perfection of your faith that I was after. I gave you a test, not for you to fail, but for you to grow. Next section, James 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith, without any doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Here's where James seems to go sort of like Proverbs. He just excerpts. He's got 3 verses, and he talks about our faith persevering through trials. Now he's got this wisdom, and he's going to talk about how wisdom is needed. Then he's going to talk about the rich and the poor in the next little section we have, and that's our last section this morning. What he's going to do is he's introducing things that he's going to talk deeply about throughout the rest of the book. We get to chapter 3 and chapter 4. He's going to show us what real wisdom is. But here in chapter 1, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom. Now, I'm convinced he's really talking about if you don't have the wisdom to see your trials as God carrying you through, as God perfecting you, as God working on you. If you see your trials negatively rather than positively, if you have a whining attitude instead of a shining attitude, ask God for wisdom. And He gives to all men generously and without reproach. It's not only restricted to that, but in the context, it's particularly, God, I'm having trouble seeing what I'm going through with any wisdom. I believe in you. That's my faith. I know what you say. That's my knowledge. Now, I want you to give me the wisdom to use what I believe about you. And that's where wisdom comes in. Help me put on your glasses, God, because from down here it looks pretty bad. And God says, from up here, it's all fine. It's okay. Help me speak intent in whatever circumstance I find myself. Paul said he could do that. He could do all things through Him who strengthened him, through Christ who strengthened him. Well, not because he had anything else. He just learned to put on God's glasses. He goes to prison. Everybody says, oh, poor Paul. And Paul says, no, God sent me over here to preach to these guys. I didn't change who I was. I didn't change my focus. God told me what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to preach Christ. He didn't tell me where he wanted me to do it. So wherever he put me, I preached Christ when I got there. I knew what I was doing. I was preaching Christ. If I happened to be in jail, I preached Christ. If I happened to be in Corinth, I preached Christ. If I happened to be in Jerusalem, I preached Christ. I know my job. He had lots of testing along the way, but he knew what he was doing, preaching Christ. And everybody says, boy, the gospel, wouldn't it be a lot better if Paul was free? And he says, no, I needed to be here preaching in this place at this time. I'm going through my test, and my test is having its perfect result. And lots of people are getting to hear the gospel. If any of you lack wisdom, ask of God. Ask him to help you see what you're going through. Ask in faith without any doubting. Well, isn't that the real issue? If I didn't have any doubts, then I'd have all the wisdom I need. Well, I think he's just admonishing there, just helping us grow. There's a way to ask. I don't want you to be an unstable-minded guy. You remember Two-Face? He's played by Tommy Lee Jones in the Batman movies, probably in the comic books. I don't read the comic books. I just watch movies. But before he can make a decision, he has to flip a coin. We're of two minds about this. And however the coin falls, that's the direction that he goes. I think sometimes we live our lives that way. Oh, if I can flip a coin and have a good attitude, fine. If I can't, if I flip a coin and have a bad attitude, I have a bad attitude. And he's saying here, no, that's not how life is lived out of faith in who Christ is. God is in charge of our world. And I'm pleading with you to ask for his wisdom to see things that he's doing and carrying you through these moments. Verse 9 through 11. The brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position, and the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass, he will pass away. The sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too, the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. Now, the rich man in James is the one who is giving you your test. He's the one who's bringing persecutions on you. He's the one that's causing your trials. They're going to come up in chapter 2. They're going to come up in chapter 5. Sometimes they're withholding people's wages. Sometimes they're just taking Christians to court. And so James has this setup here. And in him, the rich are those who are oppressing. In the world in which James writes, he says the rich are the ones who are doing the oppressing, and you're the ones who are going through this tribulation. And I want you to consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And he says, I want you to understand, if you lack wisdom about that, ask of God and he'll help you see that clearly. And then he says, if you are a brother in humble circumstances, if you're poor, if you don't have all the things everybody else has, if you're just getting by, he says, I want you to glory in your high position. Because God doesn't see it that way. God doesn't look at your bank book. God does not say success is tearing down your barns and building more. Right? He says, this very night your soul is required of you, to the guy that does that. God says, success is a heart that pursues me. God says, success is obedience to my spirit, my design, my will. It's even obedience in the midst of your suffering and persecution. It's obedience there. It's telling your friends, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what God's doing. I'm just going to have to trust him to carry me through it, because I can't wake up in the morning. I can't get up in the morning. I have so much depression and so much sadness and such a burden that I can't move. And it's only by the grace of God that I begin to see again, that I begin to function. He's carried me through. He'll carry you through. He'll tend to you in that. But the rich man is to glory in his humiliation. If he can learn to do that, he's going to be okay. If he can't, then he's going to be in trouble. Because in the midst of his pursuits, just like the wind comes up and withers the grass, he's simply going to fade away. He's not going to have anything to carry him through. He's not going to have any substance to him. He's going to be the one who trusted in his riches and they'll bury his riches with him. Imagine being one of those pharaohs saying, no, I don't want any of my sons to have any of my stuff. Just put it all in this pyramid with me. I might need it when I get there. Going somewhere, he's got to have his money. I'm going to take my gold with me. No, it doesn't work that way. In the midst of those pursuits, he has nothing left. But in the midst of the man who is in poor circumstances, he's had to learn to trust in God. I don't know if you're willing to pray this prayer, but there's a prayer that all of us should pray. God, never give me more, so much more, that I forget to trust in you. Always keep me focused on who you are. There are people that trust God for their lunch today because they don't know where it's coming from. You may be one of them. We live with such an abundance. We don't think about things that way. God, break me and make me trust you in my humble circumstances. So I'll learn to shine and not whine. If only I had, if only I had. He says, you have the God of all the universe who has sacrificed his only begotten Son so you could live with him forever. What more do you want? What more do you need? He's got it for you. He gives it to you. It is your abundance. Grace to you and peace is the blessing. Good morning, church, is the blessing. The power that God has for us is the blessing. Shine, don't whine, because verse 12 is true. Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. It comes back to the conclusion of this enduring, suffering faith. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trials. I want you to look at the text closely. Verse 12. For once he has been approved, the testing is for your approval. God anticipates you being approved. It also does not say, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because once he has been approved, he'll receive the crown of life. You don't get the crown of life because you've been approved. And it isn't, if he is approved, he'll receive the crown of life. It has to do with time. Once he has been approved. If you persevere under trials, once you've been approved, you receive the crown of life. The condition isn't placed in that place to make you doubt it. It is to make sure that you have confidence in the assurance of it. Oh, and I'm walking through my trials and I don't know how well I'm doing and I'm not happy in every circumstance. I haven't considered it all joy. I don't think he's asking you to be happy about that. I think he's asking us to look and say, God is growing me, testing me, challenging me, helping me advance, move, gain. He's helping me go. Well, that's where we need to go in our life. Because once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord will award to those who love him. So the scripture reading this morning that we had from 2 Timothy, Robert read. Oh, he says, in the future there's laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord will award to me, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. What are you doing with your trials today? Shining or whining? Are you a victim? Are you letting your light so shine before men that they may see his good works and glorify him who is in heaven, your Father who is there? Glorify God with the things that happen in your life, with who you are, with the way you live, with the walk you have. Shine, don't whine. Satan loves whiners. It doesn't mean that it's wrong for you to voice what's on your heart. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be honest and sincere. I'm saying that God wants you to put the glasses on that says, no, he's put me in a place where I can shine today. Someone else is going through what I went through, and I need to shine so they'll see that they're going to survive this, that they're going to walk through it and be okay. Someone else is burdened with what I've been burdened with. How great is our God, is the song you sing. How great is our God. You sang that so well. He is mightier than our problems, bigger than our difficulties. He is carrying us through the storms till the storm passes by. I don't know what you're going through today. If you're overburdened and you need prayer with one of the elders and their wife, they'll make themselves available. They're here for you. If you're just weighed down because of stressors and trials that you have, we're not putting on a happy face saying it's all just going to magically disappear. What we're asking you to do is say, come ask your brothers and sisters to help you carry the burden. Ask God to help lighten your load. Ask Him to carry it with you. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, Jesus says, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Together we stand and sing.